Hello, everybody, and welcome to Cinema Savvy. It is myself, George, joined once more by Dave for a very special review. And we are back talking Pinocchio for the second time this year. And this is the Guillermo del Toro version of Pinocchio, not the Disney one starring Tom Hanks, the much better one. We can just say this one, not that one. I phrase that very badly for an intro. But before I embarrass myself further, Dave, how are we doing tonight?
Very well, thank you very much, friend. Great big movie I saw just a couple of days ago, so it's pretty fresh. I saw it when it came out on Netflix, as I hadn't obviously had a chance to see it when it had its very limited cinema run. So yeah, actually looking forward to talking Pinocchio. But yeah, all good. Nice to be back.
Definitely. And to everybody watching at home, as Dave said, this is out on Netflix for everyone to view now. So please do comment your thoughts. Maybe on Pinocchio as a story, a fantasy tale, the Shrek version, you name it. Go comment about Pinocchio. Compare it to the other versions. And be sure to let us know. And if you enjoyed this video, if you enjoy other videos, please do consider hitting the subscribe button. Do like it and share it if you've really enjoyed it. It does help support the channel. As we start moving into Oscar season, we're going to get a few more reviews like this. January's pretty stacked. Netflix has a lot coming out across December, so there'll be a lot more of these discussions for what we could argue is the higher end films. But there's a few other ones coming in between. And if you want to find out about other videos when we announce stuff, some things come later than others, go get us on our social medias, Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. We've got a link to Letterboxd in that description, alongside a link to Redbubble. You can find us on there. There's a few big videos coming up, so I do suggest hitting that subscribe button for when we can give a little bit more detail. Go search our Twitter page to find out about what that video may be, off a couple of retweets today. But kind of coming into this, yes, as well, this is on Netflix for everyone to view. Dave, you mentioned the limited cinema release. There was one cinema showing it near me. It was showing it once a day for a week at 10:50 a.m. Brilliant for anyone that works.
Yeah.
Even better for parents that want to, take their kids to a film about Italian fascism, which we'll also talk about. Good one taking the kids to that. We've got Martin in the comments. Evening, fellas. Thank you, as always, Martin, for tuning in. But Dave, I'm going to kind of not put you on the spot, but I just want to kind of maybe get your thoughts. You saw this before me. I was very lucky. I was up very late, as were you. And I saw your recent Letterboxd. You slapped a good review on there. I was like, okay, I'll see if Dave's free to save me recording solo. And you were. So thank you for coming on. But just quickly, I'm curious about what were your thoughts heading into this film before, you got the chance to see it?
It was very much more of a fascination. I have peaks and troughs when it comes to Del Toro's work. Some of it I really like, some of it I'm a bit on. So it was very much more the spectacle of seeing this style of animation, which isn't done very often anymore. It's lovely to see stop motion when it's done. I mean, we'll probably get into a lot, but as well as this is, I mean, it's incredible. So that was very much what drew me to be watching the story. The live action Pinocchio that we'd had earlier in the year, like a lot of people I wasn't really a fan of, but I love the original Disney cartoon, the animated film for that. So yeah, I very much wanted to see what this was like, and I couldn't. It was literally on day of release. It was one I sat down and decided I really had to watch.
No, definitely. And this is kind of the same thing for me. Like Del Toro, I've not seen many. I think I've seen maybe half of his films. I've somehow not seen Blade 2, and I always bring that up around. I don't know why. I probably will see the Blades eventually. I've just never seen them for some strange reason. But considering, I guess the UK release date, this is his second film of the year. Of course, we had Nightmare Alley out earlier this year, Shape of Water a couple of years ago. But what surprised me about this Pinocchio film was that this has been in production for like 10, 15 years. It's had when there are trouble. Listen, there's The Rock saying he spent 15 years making a terrible film called Black Adam, and then there's an actual filmmaker like Del Toro saying he's tried to make this film for 15 years, which is a very different circumstance. But I was kind of quite curious heading into that. We had the other Pinocchio a couple of months ago. We knew this was in production. It's like that weird. It happens a few times a year. Like, do you remember White House Down came out like 3 months after
Armageddon, Deep Impact. Yeah, we had.
You get it quite a bit. I feel like there's another one, but it happens. You get these trends where you get Jungle Book and Jungle Book, even similar.
Yeah.
The Andy Serkis one, which was in production years before the Disney one, but obviously never got completed, and that ended up on Netflix ultimately. But just a bit of background for anyone curious at home to this entered development hell as there was. It was then cancelled in 2017, and then Netflix came on board in 2018, brought it back to life. I'd imagine that's post Shape of Water, which would make a lot of sense, given Del Toro winning the Oscar. But knowing there was going to be a stop animated film. I've never read the books, The Adventures of Pinocchio. Again, I've seen the Disney film. Obviously, I've seen Shrek. I know it's a very different Pinocchio in that, but it's hard not to be familiar with the tale of Pinocchio. And Del Toro is a really interesting filmmaker that I've not seen a lot of his work. There are a few of his films I love, a few I'm not too keen on, but I really enjoy listening to him talk about film, listening to him discuss film and his attachment to the industry. And I think he's a fascinating individual, which I think if people knew more about his life and some of the stuff he's been through as a filmmaker as well, it's quite incredible. And to me, there's this sense of not proudness, but I read some interviews with him with this film, right? And it just goes back to him saying that the 30s Pinocchio is one of his favorites. He kind of immediately says, I can't make a film like it. I can't make that like Pinocchio. I've got to have my own version. And it's even his process behind making the stuff like this. Choosing, if you've anyone's seen there's a documentary on Netflix, I've not seen it yet, which has just come out about how they've made this film. And it's the process of how he's
Cinema, I think it's called. Yeah.
Yes. And I know there's a co-director as well who I should have mentioned, Mark Gustafsson, which this is his first co-directed film as well. It's just quite incredible how this has come together. And kind of, as I said, heading in this, had the world premiere at the BFI Film Festival. I didn't cover it much this year, so I could have done this months ago, but I didn't. I'm quite envious of seeing this in people see it at the cinema.
Yeah.
I'm going to play devil's advocate for once and say I don't think this was like essential cinema viewing for me. I think this was perfectly done for Netflix. It might be different if I'd have seen it in a cinema, if I'm being honest. And if I had a wide release, I would have certainly been in the cinema. But a film like this coming out now, I was quite up for it. I'm a bit behind on my new releases. There's been a lot of things happening. I thought, got home last night after the football, watched the Guardians of the Galaxy Christmas special at last. Thought, I watched Pinocchio now. Very strange film to watch at 2 a.m. I'll give it that. And I'm just going to say, I just talking the main setting, which I guess is a big thing in the story. I was not expecting. I don't want to call it the darker Pinocchio because that's a bit unfair because that sort of compares it to Disney. But I wasn't expecting maybe a more so adult themed Pinocchio. I don't know what kind of you were like with that as well.
It's certainly. I didn't know the setting or anything going in, so I'd seen a few bits of behind the scenes, like the making of when that green screen video they had out for a little while, where you see them making over months the scenes. I'd only seen sort of that, and that doesn't kind of give you an indication of where the actual setting for the movie is going to be. To then get this opening where you are slap bang in war time, it was quite an incredible sort of. It almost took me back a little bit, like, oh, okay, this is a very, very different telling of what we're getting. We're getting basic knowledge of what Pinocchio is. Boy lies, wants to be real, nose grows. Outside of that, Del Toro took the story and made it what he wanted to be. And I've never read the original book. I don't know what the story of that book is like in comparison to this. But yeah, it was jarring, but only for a few seconds. As soon as I kind of like. Once the first big set piece happens, you're very much in that time and of like, okay, I know where we are. I know where we are in the world, in the timeline. Everything else is great. And I was very transfixed with how they continued on that. There's some really dark themes over this story, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later in if it's aimed where it's the people it's aimed at. But yeah, I think it was a really refreshing way to do it, even though setting it where they did.
Yeah, refreshing is probably the better term. I mean, it's hard not to think of the Disney version because obviously it's so iconic in its own right. But with Pinocchio being obviously one of those, it's not even a fairy tale, is it? It's like the late 1800s. The novel came out. I know it's in the public domain, so anyone can do Pinocchio. There's been so many Pinocchio films, adaptations. It's sort of like another Pinocchio. And that was, if I'm being blunt, one of my thoughts heading in. But to me, it was then, but it's a stop motion animation Guillermo del Toro Pinocchio, which makes me think there's going to be a bit of love. And the Disney adaptation was quite soulless and disgusting. That's sort of my sort of vibe of it, especially compared to their other live action reboots. That was by Country Mile the worst. But I felt there's a filmmaker that wants to make this film, and it shows. And then, as you said, once it starts getting into it, you think, oh, like, this is a very different Pinocchio, which is really intriguing. I mean, it's set in the 1930s in Italy. Mussolini is in charge. Fascism is on the rise. And we can even say, I guess we can say it begins in the First World War as well,
Yeah, yeah.
which massively caught me off guard. And my brain was saying, "Yeah, I know this book's not from them, so this is quite an original concept for it moving forward." And I think to me that sort of calmed not necessarily any nerves, but that was me thinking, "Okay, this isn't going to be the same Pinocchio that's been done to death. This is going to be something completely different." And even going as far as to, not without jumping in, but the concept of him becoming a real boy isn't even a main part of the film, which I think is also great in its own right. That this is really, and it's going to be the first major blessing we give to David Bradley, who plays Geppetto. But this is really Geppetto's film more so than any other character in this. And I'm just going to cut to David Bradley now. And listen, I've loved him since I was little. You know, his wife was my French teacher at primary school, so I've always had a connection. He used to come into our primary school. This is post Harry Potter, so he was Filch, and he'd come in and do Filch like quotes to us all. And obviously, because he's local to where I live, he's obviously had a bit of a, not a comeback, but you know, he popped up in Game of Thrones after Harry Potter. He plays the first Doctor, doesn't he, now on Doctor Who when they've brought him in. And I think he's a traditional stage actor that isn't necessarily the household name. Not that he should have been, but he's very much a British character actor. And to see him, yes, it's a voice role, but in a sort of lead as such in a Guillermo del Toro film, I couldn't wrap my head around it in a really great way. I was like, this is amazing. I'm so happy that this is happening, that outside of British cinema, whatnot, he's getting some recognition of roles. I know he's been on American productions before. I'm not saying it's not that, but I was just so taken back by David Bradley. I thought he was the best of the voice cast in it, if I'm being honest. I know the performance goes in hand with the actual the stop motion animation, which we'll get into, but I loved him. And in turn, I enjoyed the story more so being from his point of view. I like him more than Pinocchio. I know obviously it's still Pinocchio's point of view, but I thought Geppetto would do what he does in the other ones, come in at the start, disappear, come back at the end, but he never did.
Yeah, it's you're right. It's very much his focus story. It's not the real boy aspect is there, but it's literally used what 3 minutes maybe in the whole story, and towards the back end where we find out because Pinocchio is kind of almost mocking his immortality. To be honest, through the rest of the story points, he sort of when he does die, he knows he's going to come back. It's self-sacrifice we get later when he does become a real boy, but that doesn't translate as he's now a flesh and bone boy. He's still sticks and bits of wood, and I really like that they didn't transform him in any way. But no, I thought he was except Geppetto being the sole, not the sole, but yeah, actually, you know what, mainly the sole focus, you know, outside of Mussolini and the Gestapo and things like that, which was incredible. But he played it so well. It's hard to describe how he put his spin on this character, this loving man who was broken by a loss and is broken still right through the film, even when Pinocchio comes to life. There's no celebration of that at first. It's a horror thing. Like this is not life. He's a drunk at that point. He's really broken the devastation by losing his son. A spoiler alert, it happens really early on. It's not a spoiler. It's a big explosion. That bomb falling into that church, by the way, just seeing it coming. Wow. But yeah, I think he played an exceptional. I'm glad he's getting this recognition from this as well. It's lovely to see him in Harry Potter. I love seeing him as the first Doctor in the Doctor Who's when they have him in the specials and things. But yeah, his voice work on this was exemplary.
Yeah, and I think that's what caught me off guard is because we've not, again, it's not, we haven't seen him in these roles. It's more maybe myself or, as we said, American cinema, pop culture. And I think from some development I was reading that John Hurt was attached where this was first being created in the late noughties, early tens, and David Bradley had worked on another Guillermo film and replaced John Hurt on there. So they obviously worked with each other in the past, but it was just such an interesting role because I guess this is a critique of modern Hollywood, right? Is that we get these animated films now, maybe even Disney adaptations, we can call them, and they just go and grab the A-listers and put them in roles for voice actors. Now, listen, David Bradley's not a voice actor, he's not an A-lister, but he's a stage actor, and you could feel that authentic performance in there. and it just worked. And this is a pretty stacked cast as well. We can also add that there are some big names in this. And I guess it was sort of segueing into one of the other ones. We've Gregory Mann, which is his first ever role, voices both Pinocchio and Carlo, of course, Geppetto. And you mentioned the death of the son. I don't know if this is a thing from the original book. I doubt it because that was set in the World War. But you mentioned that build up on that scene. Like, we kind of knew he's going to die in the opening because you've got to have Pinocchio. You know, he doesn't have a son. Geppetto's a lonely man. And then when you start spending time with it, you think, oh, something's going to happen bad in this church. Like, this is, and I'm also there thinking, so this is Pinocchio. This is a kid's film. How are you going to do this? And then it's like, let's have a stop motion animation bomb blowing up a church. Like, oh, wow, okay, all over an acorn. And again, the performance from David Bradley helps with that. The animation will get to, but it was quite. That was kind of the big moment. Okay, this is going to be different to what we've seen before. This isn't going to be nice and easy. This isn't going to be Pinocchio growing his nose and having a good laugh with everyone else. This is going to be something else. And when when it does cut to present day, the 30s, it's like the first time you get the salute, I'm like, are we in Mussolini's Italy? Like, have I missed something from like modern history? And I was so not confused, but I thought they're really doing this. But just Gregory Mann, the voice actor, again, you know, a younger. I thought he's great. It's harder with kid roles, especially for voice acting, especially with him being so young. But I thought he was fine in it. Obviously, we've got to talk about being in the lead role. But I'm in this stage where, is this made for kids? I don't know. I don't think so, if I'm being completely blunt. But he never falls into that trap of being the annoying child. And the problem with Pinocchio I have inherently as a character is that he was a wooden toy that wants to become a real boy. So it has to be that sort of stereotypical child performance. But it isn't with this. It feels more layered. And I think this is the longest stop motion animation film ever made. This is 1 hour 54 minutes, including credits, which is quite incredible when you really think about that achievement. He leads us. He's there from the start through to the end, and he has quite an enthralling journey. Even the epilogue of him, you know, with the graves of the others was quite deep, which I didn't think would come. I thought it was great to get him in it. Again, it's hard to develop a character like Pinocchio, but certainly in this, I felt there was something in there.
You need that childlike wonder for it because he essentially doesn't know what anything is when he first wakes up. He starts to question about what's this, what is that? Oh, and this, oh, that's really nice. I don't know what that is. And it wasn't so much focused this one on, let's say, that real boy element. It was something that was bestowed upon him in these crazy the gift of life, and then obviously we meet death as well, which is, I mean, this death is sort of probably the biggest through line of this story.
Yeah.
It's very much focused on that. It's and it's so well done. I mean, you know, you're going to get Del Toro's design work is exceptional as always. He loves wings with eyes. We see that again. He has his creature design is always amazing. I thought even the what's a whale in the original Pinocchio, and they changed to a more of a monster in the Pinocchio live action, the Walt Disney one. But yeah, I thought that was the whole thing. But yeah, I thought the kid, I can't remember his name, who played Pinocchio was really good. He had a lot to do, and to sell a young boy who is still learning, but also I do find there's an arrogance about him when he realizes his immortality. At that point, when he discovers that no matter what happens, he's going to wake up, without realizing when she says that every time you visit, you'll spend more time here. So when you go back, you've missed quite a chunk of what's been going on in real life. I really like the element that it took a little while to learn that, to say that arrogance about him. Yeah, I'll just go back and it'll be fine. And I don't die. I'll see you in a bit. I thought it was very well played. I thought for a young actor to be given that as their first major role, as when he started this would have been a lot younger as well. So I thought it was really good in it. I really actually enjoyed his performance.
No, I'm kind of with you on that, and I guess one of the leads. We won't go through everyone because there's so many big names, but obviously Ewan McGregor starts in this, our beloved Obi-Wan Kenobi, in his sort of Jedi advisory role about an arrogant young boy he takes under his wing. You know, history repeats itself. The biggest thing that took me off guard is that I thought Jiminy Cricket was the name of the cricket bit. It's not. Apparently, it's like book name is the Talking Cricket, which is the most ridiculous name I've ever heard. So in this, he's called Sebastian J. Cricket. And I love the concept that, and I don't again know if this is a book thing or Del Toro, but the tree that was planted became his home, and that tree in turn is turned into Pinocchio, which I thought was a great thing. Even going back to the David Bradley stuff, the scene where he like makes Pinocchio like it's Frankenstein's monster was like insane. I was like, why is this animation so deep? And it doesn't need to be, but it was. And I love the concept that because it's his tree, it's his home. And it took me ages to clock, why does he keep calling it his home still? It's a tree. I'm like, okay, actually, it makes sense. It's just me being stupid all along. And he seems to not die in this as well. Like the amount of times he gets stood on, thrown on, stops. He can't die. He genuinely is a Jedi Knight, which is why they cast Ewan McGregor. And even sings in the credits to follow up from his 2002 film Moulin Rouge. But I thought he's fine. Listen, it's a supporting role. You want a bit of a presence, and I think Ewan McGregor brings that. It's a familiar name. He's got his charisma, and he's a great addition to it. There's not much to do. It's a role that could be played by a lot of people, and I think there's some great voice actors in this. But I just wanted to give him his own segment because it's Ewan McGregor, and it's me talking about Obi-Wan Kenobi again.
He narrates it very well. I like how he's sort of the overall storyteller even after his story ends. He's there right through. He lives in that knot in the wood, which is where Pinocchio's heart would be. He's given that role to watch over him from his home. But I thought Ewan McGregor was really good. I love him trying to sing all the way through. There's never getting the chance until the credits. But yeah, I thought it was a really nice way that he was writing his memoirs, that he was having all these cricket adventures before he met Pinocchio, and he wanted to do Orlando and just write his memoirs and not get involved. But these things happen.
And then it appears that he's telling the story in his own afterlife, isn't he? When he's with the what were they called? The Black Rabbits, which is Tim Blake Nelson, which caught me off guard. Tim Blake Nelson voiced all of them, but that was a great little poker moment scene. And listen, we spoke about a voice cast. I really want to talk about the animation because this is the astounding thing of this. This is obviously, as I mentioned, stop motion animated. One of the lost arts, I think, of cinema now is that we don't. And I mean, you watched the ILM series as well earlier this year, and such a giant proportion was the move from puppetry and live action to computer generated imagery. But even aside from that, special effects for live action films, actual stop motion animation is so incredibly rare. And I don't think it's just the implementation of modern technology. I think it's this is going to sound potentially really bad. I think filmmakers don't have the patience, and neither do the studios, in making this. You go out to history of cinema and how important it is. And I think that ILM documentary showed the T-Rex chase in Jurassic Park as stop motion, which, it was never going to look like it does now because it's 30 plus years later. We've got the modern technology in Jurassic Park as Jurassic Park, but when this was announced, it would be a complete stop motion animated film. I was really curious about how it's going to look. Is this going to look jumpy with a weird frame rate? Is this going to, look so animated, cartoonish? And this is the best sort of appraisal for it. It looked incredible from the sense. It looks better than most modern animated films. And they're made on computers with the highest tech, the highest specs. But nothing can compensate for having those live action elements, having sets, having props, having, there's like massive Pinocchios they've built, there's tiny ones they've built, there's a variety, and it really goes into the production, into Del Toro's credit, that this animated film, I think, the word masterpiece is used too much, but this is a country mile the best animated film I've seen from this year. And it's one of the best ones I've seen in many a year. And it's so, and it looks so simple when it's not. It's so well done, but we know this has took years and years to make. And I just can't take my hat off to them enough that this ends up looking as incredible as it did, from the designs of characters as well to, when he's drinking hot chocolate, I'm like, how do you do that in stop motion? But they found a way. They did it. And I know there was a visual effect company that worked on it as well, but I can't applaud this more enough. From a technical standpoint, this is one of the best films of the year.
I was blown away from the opening frames you get of the characters of Geppetto, the carving of the crucifix that he carves into the church and puts that in, and you can see the design work that's even just gone into an animated puppet that is carved a wooden statue of the crucifixion. It's just the level of detail they went into is exceptional. I couldn't take my eyes off it. I know, like you say, they brought in some CGI stuff, but I think that's mostly for like backgrounds behind, obviously, the scenes, the clouds, things like that. But the actual work they did, I think a lot of people have probably seen it. It's the trailer where you see the green screen stuff that they're doing with takes the monkey through the circus or whatever they are, like the traveling carnival, and it takes that through. But that's 3 months of work for them just to get that shot, and I was literally aghast at some of it. Like, you would expect like an ILM to have worked tirelessly on computers to have made that, and it wouldn't have looked like it did. You couldn't get close to what they did with the level of work. I mean, we had Aardman for a long time, who was sort of the top end in stop motion, but this is not it's not just a level above, it's several levels above. I was enamored with this. I've just been blown away by the level of it. I watched the documentary there that they've got on as well, and if you haven't seen it, I would recommend highly just sitting down and watching that as a piece of, this is how he made this art. Because I think you're right, I've not seen a better animated movie. I can't think, certainly not this year. There's been nothing even. Nothing's I mean, I literally just, we were talking, I brought up a list of like the animated movies that have been out this year. Like, you would even put it against, I mean, Super Pets, Minions.
Was it Lightyear and Turning Red of Pixar's too?
Turning Red, yeah. So there's just, I mean, nothing even looks like it would come close to Netflix's Sea Beast, and I mean, My Father's Dragon might have an outside chance, but that's a different style of animation again. But it's incredible. It blows everything away. I just visually, from moment one to the finish, stunning across the board. Never a moment where I was like, I'm watching puppets. I was totally in the story, in those characters, never once taken out of it at all by anything. Loved it.
And it was like, when they're growing the nose, I'm like, how are you doing the growing the nose in stop motion? It's just the process is incredible and how they've done it. And again, it is that you've got Guillermo del Toro, one of the best filmmakers. And we spoke about his design for monsters and stuff. I love the fact he's not afraid to do, how do you say it without snobbly? Some filmmakers just want to make high-end art films, which is really not a problem. Some want to make blockbusters, which is fine as well. I love that Guillermo just wants to make the films he wants to make. And this is one of them. And we know we're getting next year. Is it the Haunted Mansion? I don't know if he's directing it or if he's involved in producing it, but that's going to obviously be based off the Disney rides. It's really interesting seeing his process and attachment to this. And as you said, you don't think at all that it's stop motion. It's so well done. You don't think it's puppets. And even, I guess, the actual, not theory, but it's a stop motion animated puppet film about a puppet that wants to be a real boy. There's something in there which is like, some English teacher at school is going to dissect and say it means 10 times more. I just love the fact that's the stylistic choice they've made, and that's how they wanted to adapt this. And I think it's going to work in their favor. And if we segue into not Oscars as such, but the Oscars are on the minds. Netflix are releasing their Oscar films every Friday at the moment. So this Friday. Bardo's next week, Glass Onion the week after, White Noise the week after. I don't think many of those are actually going to get anything. But Pinocchio, they're pushing for best film, not just animated feature, best film. And I do see, I've not seen most of them, most of the favorites. I don't see this being nominated for best film purely out of how Oscar voters vote. I think from the technical standpoint, this is one of the best films of the year. Whether that can translate into voters, I do not think so. But I would be completely amazed if this has already won best. If Turning Red, I know Pixar or Disney tend to win, but this has to win best animated film. And I think it already has, if I'm being honest. But again, I don't want to predict too far. We've not even had nominations. But what are your thoughts on it? So we've not spoken about the soundtrack. I loved the score from Alexandre Desplat. We haven't spoken about it, but he's worked with Del Toro so much. He's one of the best composers working today, and his music genuinely brings presence to these roles, and he always suits the tone of what Del Toro is trying to do, and just how they collaborate is quite sort of whimsical, and I love it. Sorry, as a side piece, I don't know if we'll get.
No,
I don't
no,
know.
the music absolutely is worth a note because as it fits perfectly to the story they're telling. This dark gets this like a really sweeping, almost uplifting at times as well. In like what you get in dark, fascist times. How many animated films do you watch where you're getting people doing fascist salutes throughout, where they're sending kids to fascist camp to be soldiers, to just it. I mean, harrowing and heartbreaking. I mean, Finn Wolfhard's in this as well, like very briefly
Yeah,
as the friend. He doesn't really get a lot to do in this film again, but that scene where they're in the two beds in the camp, and he's talking about how his father just doesn't love him. It's just heartbreaking stuff. But Oscar-wise, if this does not win at least best animated feature, there's something wrong. Because
yeah,
look, I get some bit like Light Years out there and Turning Red, which were excellent, but this is on another level. There's just no one can look at those two films or three films for whatever it is. There's five. Can't look at that with this in line and go, this wasn't the best of those. Like, there's just no way. If it got a nod for best film, you've got 10 best pictures these days. What we haven't had animated since Beauty and the Beast got nominated,
Toy
animated
Story
wise.
3, I think, is the only other
Toy
one,
Story 3 make it,
but
so
that's a
like
one-off. That's a one-off.
it's a rarity where you get an animated film that is going to get pushed to this level. There's 10 spaces to fill for best picture, and why not throw it in as a shout? I think it could make a little bit of impact. Yes, it's not going to win best picture. I don't think there's any chance of that. I didn't. Beauty and the Beast is probably the biggest push where people thought, oh, it could actually take this. But you know what? If it's not a shoe in, I will turn off the Oscars and not watch any more from that announcement, because it would be an absolute crime if this does not take the Oscar. It's got to take some beating, and it's going to have to take some technical award. It has to. The amount of love that's gone into this production, the amount of work that's gone into the production, it has to be seen on that. Just some of the stuff that goes into the costume design alone on those,
Yeah.
on the puppets that they made, it's just, the whole thing looks stunning. I just hope it gets the rewards it deserves.
Yeah, no, I mean, and especially you bring the 10 Oscars as well. To me now there is this blanket. It's a 10 nomination, not 6 to 10 as it stupidly was before. If you're saying there's 10 spots, there to me there's 2 or 3 spots in theory you can give to a film for technical craft rather than the script, or for pushing the advancements in technologies, etc. And I think Top Gun's going to occupy one of those spots from the perspective of popularity, which is fine, should be there. But something like Pinocchio, why not? You get, as you said, you get 10 options. Why can't this be one of the 10? And what we'll know when the nominations come out, but are there going to be stuff above it that we think should be? Probably. And it's going to be one of those we do revisit, and kind of in tandem with that. If I head into my final thoughts on this film, whilst I'm not the most attracted to Pinocchio as a character, as a story that's been done for decades, I loved this take on it, and I think from what I've seen, this is the best take on Pinocchio. And I just don't think it's any coincidence that Guillermo del Toro has wanted to do this, and this is how it's ended up being, because he has that craft and that ability that I think a lot of other filmmakers can't do. He has the patience, and as much as I love to criticize Netflix, for as soulless as they can be, for chucking money left, right, and center at ridiculous things, to back this is one genuine one. This is the beauty of streaming, is that there are films that can be backed from filmmakers that studios should be investing in who aren't. And this is one of those rare occasions where it's an absolute win for them as a format. And I do think this is much better suited to streaming than cinemas. If this got a wide cinema release, I don't think many people would go to it. I think Pinocchio has been done to death. This really benefits the streaming side of things, unlike Glass Onion, which would have made $500 million by now, because there's nothing out until Avatar. But that's me going off track and ready to moan about Netflix. But yeah, Dave, your final thoughts?
I think you're right. I think cinema thing with this movie would have been a difficult thing, because I think you would have got a lot of parents taking children to this movie in its opening weekend. But then I think you'd get a lot of word of mouth that this is not for younger children. Personally, I have a 7-year-old boy, and I think this was aged a above him a little bit, maybe 11, 10, 11, 12, sort of getting into that area. As I say, the main focus and a lot of the story point is about death. And while lots of movies have, and animated movies especially, have used that to kind of tell children and help them with that sort of, this is what happens in life and this is what is going on, and it brings that to them in sort of a much more gentle way. I just, for me, this didn't feel like it was something I would have taken a child to in the cinema. I think it's on Netflix. I think you're right. I think it's a perfect home that it can sit there and it will sit there for years. And I think this will get, over the years, it will grow a massive audience around this film. And I think it might eventually become the definitive Pinocchio for people to watch outside of the original animated one. I think this will, it's a very different take, but I think it will hold up more as well for me personally. But yeah, so I get what you mean. I think it going onto a streaming site is probably best. I love that. You're right. Netflix have the ability to every now and again throw out money to a film that deserves a wider audience and more eyes on it, and this way we'll get that. I adored this. I think you're right. I think it's the best for me interpretation of the Pinocchio story. I love the way they did it. I love the way they shot it. I loved sweeping camera moves in stop motion. As an exercise in artistry, absolutely amazing. The voice work was excellent for me. I thought the story was really well told. And to be honest, as I say, I mentioned on my letter, but you said my letterbox, I put this down as a 5-star movie. And sometimes you think, oh, I'm watching that, and do you really want to mark it as a 5-star movie? Because, you know, people can just throw those out. But for me, I sat at the end of that and was completely blown away by what I'd seen and moved, and it wasn't what I expected to see. And I think that was part of what prompted up as well. Going into a Pinocchio story, you think, I'm going to get this and this and this. And I kind of didn't. And yeah, I put this really high up on my list of movies for 2022. In all honesty, I would. That's why I mentioned, say, getting in the top 10 Oscars list. I can't see why this wouldn't be able to occupy a space. I rated that highly.
No, I'm with that, and it's great to hear that as well, and you'll look for it too. And kind of in tandem with that, we want to hear from people at home, so please do comment below your thoughts on Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio. I know it's technically called Pinocchio, but you can't put Pinocchio brackets 2022 because you know, Disney got there first. But as always, please do like, comment, share, and subscribe. There's a few big things coming up on the channel. I guess the best way to kickstart is giant asterisk, dependent on public transports. You know, for those that don't follow the news. There should be an Avatar The Way of Water spoiler-free review up on Tuesday at 5 p.m. British time. There is a screening tomorrow night. I will be in attendance at, unless for whatever reason things go horrifically pear-shaped, which they already have. And I've already got a plan B, which is perfectly in line. And if plan B doesn't work, I really don't know what else is going to happen. So no issues pending. Avatar The Way of Water spoiler-free review will go up on Tuesday. And then there'll be once the weekend's done and everyone's seen it, we'll do a proper a discussion on it. So we want to get everyone involved on that second one. So there'll be 2 Avatar reviews. There's going to be a lot of other things happening. Listen, we're heading towards Christmas. There's Oscar films coming out. We're heading towards Christmas, so not everyone's around. I've been busy decorating, which is finally luckily done, so I can get back to doing some videos. But it's going to be one of those times where things are going to heat up in January. We've got some announcements to make. We'll do our annual big stream where we announce our big shows for the year. So all that will be coming in the start of the new year. So do stick around. And you want to find out about our videos, what else comes up. We've had a few home media reviews. We had an unboxing of the Top Gun Maverick set behind me. Go grab us on our Twitter and Instagram at cinema_savvy, Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy. And we've got a link to Redbubble where you can pick up some merch to help support the channel in the description below. But finally, Dave, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Anytime. Pleasure as always.
I feel like I'll have you on another video by the end of the year. If I don't, a massive thank you for helping out so much across the year.
Been a pleasure.
For Star Wars, films like this, a lot of other things, it's always a pleasure to get you on. And yeah, to anyone else at home, as I said, there should be some more reviews, but they are pending as and when. So do stick around, get us on social medias. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.